All right. Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the latest Showrunner Huddle, a special pre-Christmas edition as Johnny basks in the warm, wonderful glow of snow. And I sit here in Dallas, Texas with rain, which could be snow were it not like 50 degrees. So I know some people may think that that's crazy that I'm jealous of that, but I am, as we were just talking about, because I am a child of the Midwest. I grew up with snow at Christmas. And it just doesn't feel like the Christmas holiday season when it's warm and not snowy. So
yeah, for these 3 or 4 days, it's really nice.
Yeah, it's true.
And this time next week, it's like, all right, it's done. Holiday.
Yeah. That's true. All right, so we've got a few questions. So let's hit these up. We'll go for about a half hour today. And if you have any follow-ups, let me open up the YouTube page real quick so that if anybody has follow-ups in there, I can ask. But Andrew submitted a couple of good questions. Thank you for submitting those, Andrew. And let's talk about those. So let's start actually with Andrew's second question, Johnny. And he's asking about stats. So he's wondering, what do you think about the new Libsyn stats? I don't know anything about that because I don't use Libsyn, but I'm hoping that you will. Is that a fidget spinner?
Yeah. My nephew left it.
And you've taken it as your own?
I'm actually enjoying it.
That's awesome.
It just sits on my desk now.
That's great.
Like a year, but
and now you have it.
Yeah.
So what do you think about the new Libsyn stats and the new podcast analytics from Apple? And that really that's kind of the big news in podcasting recently is Apple finally, after kind of teasing that they would and talking about it for a while, they finally released some podcast analytics inside of Podcast Connect. Have you gotten in there and checked those out?
I did, yeah.
What do you think? What was your first impression?
My first impression was they're quite cool. They tell you how many individuals or how many individual devices.
I like that too. I like how they break it down by device.
Yeah, and then they tell you like the listening time as time, I think, and as a percentage.
They have average consumption, and then they give it to you by like the total number of minutes too.
Yeah, the only issue, which I found out later, was that it's only, or from what I've heard, it's only people with iOS 11 running on their phones.
That I don't know. I do know that it's only people who have opted into sharing the diagnostic information. So anybody who opted out of that isn't going to be counted in there.
Right, and I've heard that it's only the latest iOS, because that's when they just put out the iOS with the ability to track as well for this. So I mean, anybody listening on any other devices, including like computers, doesn't get counted in there. So
yeah,
it's an awesome start. We literally had nothing before.
Yeah, it's definitely better than nothing.
Visually, it looks great, and I love that they can include the time listening because Libsyn can't do that. So that's really cool, and that's something I really liked about the Rainmaker platform because they included that. That stat, and so it's really cool to see because I mean you can tell if people are dropping off at a certain point every time. It helps you make your show better.
Yeah, I mean it's really nice being able to see the time per device per episode. Like I can look at our last show and it was an hour and 13-minute show, and the average time was 49 minutes per device, which is pretty good. The show before that was actually 56 minutes per device. And it's funny because like that show, I'm talking about the assembly call, that show was after when it was a much happier game. So people listened longer. And after the dreadful loss, people were bouncing off, a lot sooner. So it's kind of interesting to see that. I will say when I first hopped on there, the numbers were a lot lower than I was expecting based on my download numbers. And so I would say if you haven't gotten in there and looked, be prepared for a little bit of that shock. Like, whoa, these are a little bit lower than I thought. But then when you add in the context of it's only the people who submit their diagnostic information. I didn't know about the iOS part, but that makes sense too. That, kind of makes that make a little bit more sense. So I think obviously looking at the total numbers is important, and hopefully these numbers will soon incorporate more people who listen so the totals are a little bit better. But certainly being able to look at the average consumption, the time per device, and then looking at the trends and just having some kind of benchmark, some kind of information for what's going on inside of iTunes and the Apple Podcast app is so helpful. So like you said, it's, it's not totally there by any means, but it's really nice to have. And visually it looks really cool. So it's a really good start. Any other thoughts on the Apple Pod? And by the way, all you need to do is go to podcastconnect.apple.com, get set up there. You have to agree to some terms. I didn't read the terms. I just went through and clicked accept. So I have no idea. I may have signed my show over to Apple. So if you never hear from the assembly call again, that may be why. But
no, they will not let you stop. If they own your show, you are.
Yeah, you will keep producing episodes. I don't care if there aren't any games anymore.
We own you. You keep.
Yeah. So a good start. What about Libsyn? I don't have any experience with Libsyn. I use Spreaker. I've used Spreaker and Rainmaker, so those are the two that I know.
So
thoughts on Libsyn?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, So I'm actually looking at it right now, and so I honestly don't know what the.
Oh, hey, let me add one thing real quick, because Andrew said as a new show, his Apple stats say not enough data for most of his episodes.
Okay.
Hopefully more traffic will mean more data in the future. It should. I did read a show will only pop up if it's had 5 or more devices listen to it to an episode. Okay. So it takes it, and I think the play has to be at least 5 seconds long. So I think if your episodes are getting at least 5 listens, then they'll start to show. If you assume that you're getting more than that and it's still not showing up, I don't know exactly what the reason for that would be, but yes, more traffic should mean more data in the future. I would agree. Go ahead.
So Libsyn, the Libsyn update that they pushed so hard has actually really made me start thinking about leaving Libsyn.
Oh wow.
I mean, Libsyn statistics, I'm on their Libsyn statistics page now. The only thing that's been upgraded in it is the Libsyn statistics page. So one page, and really it's just like a different sort of like UI. Like it's just on a green background now and like a bit bigger of graphs. But to me, everything I can see is the exact same data, except now when you are in your dashboard and under stats, now there's show stats and then there's Spotify stats. And then the Spotify stats look exactly like the original old stats, just show you the numbers per month and then a total.
What are you seeing from Spotify?
So, currently showing up to Tuesday, December 19th, which would be 8 days after I joined, and that was 284 listens. Yeah, I can't even find my show on Spotify. Like I can find my show on Spotify by searching the title, but by actually just going through, I don't know what category it's in or where people are finding it. But 284 people, so it's like picking up. Like you can see it each day. Like, well, my top day, I think I've had 35 listens now in a day. So for just a totally new stream, I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I did notice that. I was going through looking for songs to add to my daughter's music playlist in Spotify, and like podcasts were popping up in like related searches and stuff. So they're pretty well integrated in there.
Definitely, yeah. Like if I search my name, it comes up as podcasts and stuff. So that's cool. I don't know which category, because their categories are different than iTunes, like vastly different. There's no like business category. There's like lifestyle, and then there's health, and then there's learn something. And so I see shows that are in my market in iTunes that are in different ones of those, but I also know that Spotify super highly is like always geo-targeting and changing things. Like, so depending on where I am and what device I'm on, they're just constantly testing. So which is cool, but I'm super happy, and I'm like really sort of bullish on Spotify. I actually hope Spotify destroys iTunes, because one thing, I don't like iTunes anymore. I don't like the control they've taken over the podcast market. The lack of data until like last week, which is now still quite far behind everybody else still. And it's just, you know what I mean? And it's only their devices. It's only if you do this. It's only, and they don't really tell you anything about it. So it's still all just like kind of us trying to figure out exactly what it is. Like the whole iOS 11 thing was, like I haven't seen that from iTunes, but there was a huge discussion on Reddit in the podcast subreddit, and that's what it was all. And people were like that they'd read it somewhere and stuff, and then they'd like tested something with some devices, and that's what the consensus started to be, was that if you hadn't updated your device, it wasn't going to be counted either.
Huh.
And so I don't know, man. I hope Spotify to me, they've changed the way music streaming works. iTunes has tried to come in and do it the same, and I don't think they do it nearly as well as Spotify. There's, I think, hundreds of millions of people on Spotify now already using it every single day, and they're really putting podcasts up there. Like iTunes never did that. iTunes made it a separate thing. You know what I mean? Like they were just kind of like, we'll do it. And we love the fact that you create all this content for us for free. And then it brings people into our ecosystem. But we're not going to give you anything for it. And so Spotify seems to be different. They seem to be like they're really trying to put us in the forefront to a certain degree. Like you say, you're doing other searches and it's giving you podcasts.
Is Libsyn the only podcast hosting service that puts your show directly into Spotify right now? I don't believe Spreaker does that at the current time. I haven't seen anything from them about it.
I mean, Spotify just started like this, but I mean, there are ways you can apply to be on it.
Yeah, and we presented that link a couple weeks ago.
Right.
I did, and I don't see my show in there.
Right. I mean, I didn't get any notification or anything when mine was. I just literally looked one day.
I'm looking right now.
So yeah, I guess there's that aspect of Libsyn that is good.
There's a lot of podcasts in here that I recognize.
That are what?
A lot of podcasts that I recognize, like podcasters that I recognize.
Oh yeah, totally. There's more and more and more and more and more in there now, which is really cool. I think it's great. I think this is the first one that stands a chance of really giving iTunes a run for their money. For about 3 hours, I felt this way about Google Play when it started.
Yeah.
And I mean, in the year and a half or something Google Play's been out now, I don't think I've gotten 284 downloads that I've gotten in the last 8 days. So to me, that's cool. I like that.
It is. It is. Yeah, Andrew said, I think Libsyn is the only one. Yep. And which I agree with, because I definitely haven't seen anything. So and I love, man, I know we submitted our other shows via that one link, but they haven't gotten in there. So Libsyn definitely seems like the most direct way in. Hopefully Spreaker adds that as well. Okay, let's get to Andrew's other question here. What are your thoughts on podcast networks, Johnny? There's a finance one being created. Andrew's show is a finance-based show where podcasters can join in hopes of approaching sponsors as a more valuable network rather than a single show. The network is not asking for any payment or anything in exchange from podcasters. What are your thoughts? I would assume you have had the I mean, you were obviously working with Midroll for a while. Maybe you still are, I don't know, which isn't necessarily a podcast network, but does give you some of those benefits of scale when it comes to going for advertisers. Have you ever thought about getting in any kind of like entrepreneurship network? Or you're in Rainmaker FM.
So yeah,
there's that.
So Midroll is like an advertising. What's it called? What's the word? Like they're like the buyer, right? So they're not a network in that sense. I'm assuming Andrew means like a podcast network, like Rainmaker.
Like Rainmaker FM. That's what I'm thinking too.
So Andrew, my answer to you and my answer to myself when I made this decision with Rainmaker FM was, if you keep 100% control of your own show and ownership, and if you get to take, or you know clearly what the payment is for any future ads. So if somebody buys an ad for you for X amount of dollars, do they take 10% or 20% or 0%? You need to know that in advance. And you need to know what is expected of you, whether that's talking about other shows at the end of your show or at the beginning, like other shows on the network, and sort of exchanging audiences. You need to know that. To me, with Rainmaker.fm, it was like, I'm going to put you in front of our audience. Any sponsorships you get, it's all yours, and you own 100% of your show. And so it was like, okay, sounds awesome. Like there was literally no downside to it. We did run the pre-roll like station ID at the very, very beginning, which is cool. I thought that was awesome. I liked that part of it. And then once in a while, we talked about other shows at the end, which again, I thought was great because I knew other shows were doing it for me, and it's really beneficial. So there's a huge potential. Don't do it just because you think that the whole approaching sponsors as a network. To me, what I've seen historically is it doesn't make it more valuable. Unfortunately, like sponsors seems to still be, because we tried that with Rainmaker.fm. We had a couple sponsors that bought in like that, but it didn't really, I don't know. It's because the shows were all so different. The shows' audiences were so different. The engagement levels were so different that it's like, if you think of it just as the one variable as audience numbers, download numbers, and like, yes, if you stack 10 shows on top of each other, there's more, but they're all so different. And so the chances are that yours is going to be average because most of ours are in the middle. And so some will be way better than yours and some will be way worse. But those way worse ones kind of drag the whole network down. And not worse as in worse shows, just they might be newer. They could just be anything different, or that audience doesn't exactly sort of fit with the sponsor, which is this interesting thing that I had coffee with a podcaster. He's actually the head of marketing now for Dribble. And he was in town last week, and he's a huge podcaster and super, super into it. But he was like, with Dribble, they're paying like so much money right now for sponsors on Dribble, and they don't even have a ton of downloads for their podcast. But he's like, it's shocking how a sponsor can come on and you can think they're going to do so well and literally nothing from the audience. Like the audience just does not respond to it. I said, I know. I've had some of these ones where it's like, you are perfect for this. And then it's just like 0. And then the next one comes on, it's like, oh, that'll be okay. And it's just like, whoa, can we buy more? Can we buy more? It's so fascinating to me that some sponsors really just hit audiences perfectly. And it's not the podcaster's fault, I don't think. It literally just is a perfect match. And so
is it a difference in results or a difference in expectations from the sponsors?
No, because every sponsor wants something. And some of them are literally crickets where there's just 0. And it's like, how did that happen? But I'm talking to him now. It's like they have like millions of people in their audience. And he's like, we've literally had things that just nothing. And I was like, cool, it's not just me. And then I have other ones that are just like instantly, like 2 shows go out and they're like already contacting you to buy another quarter's worth. And it's like crazy. You know what I mean? Like that's just how it works. I mean, it's why certain like of my sponsors just stay around for a year and other ones stay around for 3 episodes. And so that's really fascinating to me. But to me, that takes it to the level of you're decreasing your chances of sort of I guess achieving success with sponsors if you have 10 shows, because all 10 of those shows will not be a home run with that. And without the ROI, without them making X plus $1 at least from the sponsorship, they're not going to come back to you. And so it seems like a benefit, like they're going to bring you more sponsors, but the chances of those sponsors sticking around, I think, are almost 0 because you have so many variables. It's a great way to get in with some sponsors if you use that. Like if Hack the Entrepreneur decides to sponsor the whole network and it doesn't work out, but it worked for you, you think, you could then reach out to Hack the Entrepreneur afterwards and be like, okay, well, you sponsored me once, and that is an in to that, and that can work. But to me, it's not the holy grail for getting it. And it sounds like it is, and it's a great marketing sort of pitch or sales pitch from a network. But I just don't necessarily see it as a thing. I see it as an amazing thing for building audience and getting you in front of new people. But for the sponsorship side, unfortunately, from my experience, I don't see it as working really well.
I agree with you. And I've had success, from a sponsorship perspective, on kind of a micro level. Like, for example, with the Assembly Call, we had SeatGeek, who came to us because they were trying to go, really kind of niche down and go after specific team shows. And so they came to us, we struck a deal. Well, I happened to host another IU basketball show, podcast on the Brink for Inside the Hall. And there's, now like, 6 or 7 or 8 IU basketball podcasts. It's crazy how much that has grown. And, there's not like a network of them. But, because I hosted this other one and the audience was, it's almost an identical audience. Like it is, really zeroed in. I made that introduction, and then SeatGeek sponsored Podcast on the Brink has seen a lot of success and stuck with it. Same thing with Who's Your Proud, which is a sponsor that I reached out to individually. And that's one of the things I think you want to be careful with a network. You've got to, I love what you said, Johnny, because you've got to maintain your autonomy and your control of your show. And I think you've also got to maintain your autonomy and control of being able to find opportunities on your own. A sponsor like Who's Your Proud would never have had the money to sponsor a network. They just wouldn't have wanted to invest that much, but they were definitely down with investing in one show, where you could really kind of develop a partnership, really work hard to drive results. And the spend for them wasn't that much. And so we went out, had a successful first season. And now, again, I made the introduction like, hey, I host this other show. And now they've signed up and they're sponsoring both shows this year. So it's not a network per se, but I guess you can almost look at it as just this small little network of two shows where basically the one show kind of leads and has kind of tested it out with the sponsor, and then the sponsor has added on the second show. And because, obviously I maintain the control of those shows and have the opportunity to do that, it's worked. So I agree with you, Johnny, that from an audience building perspective, it could make some sense. From an advertising perspective, probably not going to be, deliver the great results that you may think. But you can use some of those ideas, if a sponsor works, or if you see a sponsor working for this show over here and you identify, hey, there's tremendous audience overlap there. Maybe if you have a relationship with that sponsor, they can make an introduction, and you can set it up on kind of a one-on-one basis. I think that works better, especially for smaller time podcasters like us that maybe don't have the massive numbers, than trying to just get into a network and play the numbers game. I much prefer to do it the other way, and have had more success doing it that way.
Yeah, I think it's just approaching it like that, knowing, like, focusing solely on building audience from it, and introducing your audience to other shows on the network, and then thinking of the monetization as something separate that you still have to do yourself. You still have to push yourself, and if anything extra sort of comes from them, then by all means. But don't sort of count on it. Just really, really use it for audience building.
Well, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, having somebody at the end of the show say, now that you're done listening to this, you should go listen to this show, works better than anything else for promotion of your show. It's why podcast networks do it. It's why NPR does it at the end of every single radio show, because it works. Because you have literally somebody who always listens to podcasts. They listen to podcasts in your market, and they want to know about your sort of thing, and they're just finished listening to a show. And they've listened all the way through, so they like it, and so they trust you, and now they're just going to go literally to that next show. That works amazingly. But also, you can set that up yourself. I mean, find two shows that you admire that are sort of on the same level as yours. Email them and just say, hey, why don't we do an exchange? I'll say I'll recommend your show at the end, you recommend mine, and this person recommends mine, and we'll just switch and rotate. I've done that with shows before, and it does work.
I like that idea. I want to do that with a couple shows in the IU market.
Yeah, I mean, that's the benefit of a network, and you can create that sort of network effect yourself, and get that benefit without getting any of the downside, which there might not be a downside to the network, but you do need to know that stuff in advance.
Yeah, and you're not worried about sending people to your competitors and them saying, "Oh, I like this show better. I'm never listening to Hack the Entrepreneur again." I feel like people could get territorial, and I think that's the wrong way to think about it. Yeah. You've got to think about, look, these people like this other show, and they obviously have people who haven't listened to my show yet. Let's have all boats rise, instead of, clinging to our little spot over here. I think that's a short-sighted way to look at it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I come from like rock and roll, right? I mean, it's like a band goes on tour and they bring a band they love on tour that isn't very popular. And they put them on stage before them around the world as they travel. And they don't think, well, we should bring like a really crappy band on tour so that people don't start liking them more than us. It's like, they're just going to be like, oh man, this is cool. One thing, it's like, you've introduced me to this other show that I now really like. So now I've put you in sort of a better light. And the other thing is, people who are into things are really, really into things. Like, my dad is so into like fishing that he wouldn't buy just like one fishing magazine. He would go to the store and he would buy 4 fishing magazines that were there. And it's like, well, it's all the same stuff, but he's just so into it. When we're into things, we don't just pick one of them. And then there's the whole other side of the coin where there's this whole listener lifespan that I think with your show, like with Assembly Call, you really have a longer lifespan than somebody in like the business thing like mine, because there's a lot of shows people do turn over. So they might be there for 3 months anyways. And so I get the chance to like build, and some of them stay a lot longer, but in general they don't. And so it's like you can sort of pass these off and exchange them, and it does help, I think, your reputation as the person if you're sending other people to good shows. Don't send people to crappy shows, obviously. Don't send people to shows that are just going to do a terrible job with your audience. That's like, even like with affiliate marketing, like don't try and sell your audience crappy products. Don't try and sell them stuff that isn't going to be of value to them just to make money. You have to still do that as a decent person and as a decent host. Otherwise, you'll destroy everything you've created. But to me, it's an amazing way to do it. And it's true. All ships sort of rise when it goes up. So just think of it like touring the world, and you're the main band. Bring the best band you can possibly bring with you, man. Because
it's a great analogy. All right, it's a perfect note to end on. We will. I don't know if we're going to do another one next week before the new year, but we'll definitely be doing more in the new year.
Yeah, it won't be next week. I'm taking next week off. So.
Good for you. That is good. Yeah, well, cool. Thanks for the questions, Andrew. Always a pleasure answering those. If anything comes up in the meantime, post in the Facebook group. And enjoy the rest of the week. Merry Christmas to everybody. Enjoy your snow for you lucky people who have snow. While I just look at gray skies and rain.
So easy to say from Dallas.
Yeah, but I lived in it, so I know exactly what I'd be getting myself into. I do genuinely like it. I miss the snow.
Fair enough.
Oh, well. It's all good. All right, y'all. We'll talk to you later.